On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, sorry folks, the Seaway is closed. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. It is a cold, wintry, mixed day here in North Carolina, so it kind of reminds me of the Great Lakes. So let's talk about what just happened up in the Great Lakes, which is significant. It is the latest closing of the St. Lawrence Seaway in its history dating back to 1959. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So first, the St. Lawrence Seaway is not the entire Great Lakes St. Lawrence River. Specifically, the Seaway is identified as the system of locks that connect the upper Great Lakes to Montreal. So what we have here is a series of locks all the way from the Welland Canal up and through the upper part of Lake Ontario with the Iroquois, the Eisenhower, and the Snell locks to the pairs of locks just at Montreal, and that gets you out into the St. Lawrence. Two of the locks are administered by the United States, but the vast majority of the 13 other locks are administered by the Canadian government. The dimension of the locks set the parameters for the size of vessel that can transition from the St. Lawrence to the upper Great Lakes and back. So we have a maximum length of 740 feet. That's 225.5 meters. The vessel can carry up to 30,000 tons per voyage. It has a beam of 78 feet or almost 24 meters, a maximum water draft of about 26.5 feet, a little bit over 8 meters, and an air draft, this is the distance from the water to the very top of the vessel, of 116.5 feet or 35.5 meters. Now, the movement of cargo by sea provides a huge bonus for efficiency. If we look at a ship carrying about 30,000 tons of cargo, whether it be grain, project cargo, iron ore, or break bulk, that's equivalent to about 964 trucks or 301 rail cars. If we look in terms of carbon footprint, it is much better for the environment in terms of CO2 per gram per ton out in the air than something like trucks. Same thing with fuel efficiency. So movement of cargo by sea has always proven to be very efficient. One of the reasons, but that the Great Lakes kind of suffer here is a couple of things. Number one, its location. It takes a while to get up into that system. It is a circuitous route. You do have size limitations on the vessels, and probably one of the other biggest issues is the seasonal nature of the Great Lakes. They close. From roughly January to March is the period of time when the Great Lakes shut down because of ice. Now, to all you ship voyeurs out there who have a real interest in shipping, and particularly up in this region, let me recommend you over to the place I go, and that is to the Seaway Ship Watchers Network, an outstanding group of people that really monitor ships up and around this area. In particularly, I follow Mike Folsom over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Always has some of the best information out there for what is happening up on the St. Lawrence Seaway. So this year marks the latest that the Seaway has remained open, and it wasn't easy getting the last of the ships out of the Seaway. What tends to happen here is Canadian Coast Guard, along with other assets, are working last minute to try to squeeze out as many ships as they can out of the Seaway. If you can extend this season out longer, it is much more cost effective, and what we saw was an effort to do that. This story by a local news agency up in the area talks about the delays on the St. Lawrence, which are proving costly. So back on January 8th, there were 6 ships still between Cape Vincent and Messina, with many more downriver around the locks of Montreal. Each day became more costly for the stakeholders as ships remain at a standstill. According to Mike Folsom, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars every day you sit, depending on deadlines to get their ships to its destination, penalties, and things like that you might encounter. The extra ice is also costly for the Seaway, which was supposed to close Monday. Since then, it had to use significant manpower to keep the waterways clear and the locks running. The teams that's up near the South Shore Canal has been working nonstop trying to keep those locks clear from ice. Videos showed tugboat propellers beating up ice to allow ships to make their way through the frozen waterway. To give you an idea, this is a video done by the Canadian Coast Guard talking about ice breaking up on the Great Lakes. And you can see the efforts that are done by both the Canadian Coast Guard and the U.S. Coast Guard up on the lakes. It is a arduous duty. You need ice-strengthened vessels. Icebreakers make their mark by literally crushing the ice underneath their hull. Unlike what we tend to think, where icebreakers, just split apart ice, they actually use the weight of the vessel to do this. So the Canadian Coast Guard provides that icebreaking service between the ocean and down to Montreal. The United States and the Canadians share icebreaking service out on specific Great Lakes. And what we see is as the ships get closer into the lock system, that's where ice tends to congregate into the shallower and closer water systems. Now, the last ship that made it out was a ship called the Noel G, a Malta-flagged 606-foot bulker that came out on January 13th of 2026. Here's the track of Noel G. You'll see that it was stuck just down here, just at the very bottom of Lake Ontario, waiting to get up into the St. Lawrence and then make it past those lock systems that are there at Montreal. And once clear of Montreal, the ship hit clear water, was able to sail from Montreal straight out of the St. Lawrence, and now heading across the Atlantic. The ship has a destination of England. This map shows you the Great Lakes ice coverage as of January 17th. It's currently sitting at about 15% ice coverage. The average over the past 50 years is roughly around 22% at this point. You'll see here at the very northern edge of Lake Ontario, which feeds into the St. Lawrence, it's sitting at about 8%, but that's where you start getting that ice coverage. The Welland Canal, which connects Erie to Ontario, is right here. And then down in the southern end of Lake Erie, you see this big buildup always. We always see down the southern end of Lake Erie, the buildup initially coming out of Detroit, connecting between Huron and Erie. Another place you see it is over here by Mackinac, where we see the connection between Michigan into Huron, and then the connection between Superior and Huron. This is the Sioux Locks. Right now, we've seen the last ship just make it through the Sioux Locks. On January 15th, the American-flagged American Spirit, a 48-year-old bulk carrier, 1,005 feet long, carrying 51,000 tons of iron ore, came out of Lake Superior into Lake Huron and is now in Lake Erie. Pop over here to marine traffic again. You can see how the lakes are basically empty here. Here's American Spirit down at the southern coast. Here's American Spirit down on the southern shore of Lake Erie. Just a few ships out and running right now, still in the region. So here we see the Baltic. This is an oil chemical tanker, Danish flag, heading between Green Bay, heading over into Canada. Up here we see the Up here we see the Algoma Niagara, also heading out of Milwaukee, heading over into Canada. Here we have a Canadian tanker, Algo Nova, coming out of the Sioux Locks. Another tanker, this is Algo Alberta, coming out of Port Huron, heading northbound into Lake Huron. And we're just seeing a few vessels right now making that transition out of Lake St. Clair between Huron and Erie out into Lake Erie. These will be the last vessels probably moving into position. Here's the Edwin H. Galt heading into Toledo, and the Algo Canada coming in right behind it. Now, the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence Seaway, provide a tremendous amount of trade. It's estimated about $50.9 billion in US dollars of trade will move through this system annually. It is massive, but it does have issues with it, obviously. The closure from January to March does shut down everything up on the lakes. It gets really rough up there. It is cold. It is bitter. Nobody wants to be up on the Great Lakes, and it's amazing that they've been running this late into the season. Draw from it what you will. They're just running a very late season this year. They usually open up again back in March. The U.S. is undergoing a big refurbishment of the Sioux Locks between Superior and Huron. That needed to be updated forever. It is a system failure that there's one set of locks to go through there. Should those locks fail, it shuts up thousands of tons of iron ore and material that need to get down to factories down up on Lake Erie. So that's really crucial, and that work is ongoing. It's a long, laborious process. There are issues with the age of some of these vessels because of the Jones Act, which mandates that if you move cargo between two U.S. ports, you have to be on a U.S.-owned, U.S.-built, U.S.-flagged, and U.S.-crewed ship. Many of the ships that the U.S. use on this lake are old. However, it is a freshwater lake, so the preservation of the vessels is much better than putting them in salt water, which is basically like a light acid. So it tends to be better for them, but age is age. Steel in the bitter cold up here has a rough effect on the age of these vessels. Really need a vessel replacement program to start changing them out. The most recent vessel on there, the Barker, built a few years ago, was the first new vessel built in 40 years. And so definitely need that. Canadians get by with this by using foreign flagships and foreign built ships up on the lake, two different systems that are in operation up on the lakes between the U.S. and the Canada. The other issue really important to talk about here is the connection between the lake here and the Seaway system. One of the big flaws in the system when it was created in 1959 was they wanted to promote more ships coming from international ocean trade up onto the Great Lakes. Unfortunately, one of the things they failed to do was take measures to prevent the dumping of water ballast into the Great Lakes from overseas. You had ships coming from Europe, Africa, Asia come up into the Great Lakes. They would dump their ballast tanks, their water tanks that put the ship lower in the water as they loaded cargo. So they would pump the water out. The problem was they didn't filter that water. They didn't treat that water. So what we had was contamination of the Great Lakes by invasive marine species. Now, there's a very strict system in place today that monitors ballast water on board ships and what you have to do to be able to offload that ballast water. So the chance of invasive species coming in anymore, new ones coming in, is minimal. However, the damage has been done. We see that with the invasive zebra mussels that are taking over parts of the Great Lakes. Same thing with everything from Asian carp to a whole other variety of species in the area. But the Great Lakes is America's fourth ocean. It is vital not just for the United States, not just for Canada, but for international trade. Limitations are those lock systems that get you out of Lake Erie up into Montreal. So again, 750-foot vessel, 30,000 tons, not very big, not really conducive for deep draft traffic, but when designed in 1959, that was pretty good. And so we definitely see that system playing a role. We do see ships from around the world actually transit the system and arrive right there in the middle part of the United States and Canada. I hope you enjoyed our Great Lakes episode for this. We really want to thank Mike Folsom and the crew over at the Shipwatchers Network for all they do. I follow them all the time. Every time there's a grounding, and groundings happen quite a lot in the lakes and in the Seaway system because it's a pretty narrow waterway system. I follow them all the time. If you can, go over there, show them some love, show them some support. Make sure you follow Mike on Twitter and follow them on YouTube and all the other social media platforms that they're on. I'll have them all listed down below there so that you can see them in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you hit this super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Until we get some warmer, clearer weather here, this is Sal, signing off.